Today I'm going to be showing you a tutorial which is absolutely perfect for anyone that's never needle felted before. My name is Charlotte Allen and you've reached my channel, The Felting Alchemist. In today's tutorial we're going to be making this really cute needle felted bed, and he's based very loosely on this rose coloured robin that I saw on Facebook the other day, and you get things that pop up, and I saw this robin and I was like, oh, that's so pretty. Maybe I'll make it in a needle felting tutorial, so I have. He's really simple to make, and like I said, you can make him even if you've never picked up a needle before. It's really straightforward. There's not too many materials and there's not too many tools that you need to use, just the core tools that I always use in all my tutorials. He's made on a polystyrene ball, and the reason that I've put him on a polystyrene ball is because going back to the video I added a few days ago about the controversy of polystyrene balls in needle felting and whether we should use them, whether we shouldn't, a few people have messaged me saying they'd really like to see how I felt onto a polystyrene ball. Now I know that there's some people out there that don't like them because they're not biodegradable, they're not very good for the environment, and I completely get that, and I do discuss that in the tutorial as well. So I understand they're very Marmite, some people like them, some people don't. If you don't like them and you don't want to use them, you can just use an ordinary felted ball. You don't need to use a polystyrene ball for this. The only difficulty you may come into is when you're adding the legs for our bed at the beginning of the tutorial, but if you're used to needle felting, you could probably just felt those in very carefully. You don't necessarily need to insert them, but you could just use a needle felted ball rather than using a polystyrene ball if you don't want to do that. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to show you what materials and tools you're going to need for this tutorial. See you in a moment. In today's tutorial, you're going to need a few different materials. You're going to need some wool bats. I would suggest getting around about 20 grams of wool bats. That should be enough to create the body of your bed. You're going to need, of course, a polystyrene ball. And this is a 4 centimetre polystyrene ball, but you could go for larger if you want to make a slightly larger bed. But take into account that if you're going for a larger ball, you're then going to need larger quantities of the wool as well. So then with the colours I'm going to add to the bed, I've gone for this pink wool bats here, which is a New Zealand merino wool bat. And then I've also gone for this brown Corriedale colour. The reason I've got Corriedale and merino is purely colour selection. I couldn't get the brown that I wanted in the merino, so I've gone for a Corriedale, which is a really nice wool, and then I couldn't get the pink I wanted in the Corriedale, which is why I've gone for the merino. So no scientific reason for it, just purely my choice of colour. So in terms of quantities, you're not going to need very much. So I'd say about 10 grams of pink, but you can choose whatever colour you want. This is going to create the breast of our bed. And then here I've probably got, again, about 11 to 12 grams of the brown Corriedale. Again, you probably won't need this much. I like to have a little bit extra just in case there are any mistakes or if there's anything additional I need to do with it or add additional bulk. So those are the two colours I'm going to have my bed in. I've then got a small amount of black wool bats, and this is going to be for his eyes and his beak. So you don't need a huge amount of this. I would go for a brown or a black. I wouldn't go for anything lighter in colour. I'm always cautious about going for an orange with a smaller bed because then it could start looking a bit duck-like potentially. You may disagree with me. Go with what you feel, but I would say stick with a darker colour. Then I've got my wire snips, and I've also got my black luxury chenille pipe cleaner. This is a 4mm pipe cleaner, and as you can see it's got this very fine chenille covering all over the wire. I wouldn't recommend using one of the cheap craft pipe cleaners because what you'll find is they're a lot more soft in the metal, making them a lot more flexible, so when you come to want to stand your bed up or anything like that, the legs aren't going to hold very well. So I would go with one of these just because you've got a bit of a stronger wire in there, and it just looks nicer with the chenille over it rather than having that kind of fluffy finish that you get with the cheaper pipe cleaners. I've got my needle felting mat, which is always important to have when you're needle felting, and I'm also going to be using my needle felting brush mat along with my 7 needle multi-tool, and in here I've just got 7 fine needles, and they're just triangular needles, nothing special, but there's 7 of them in there. I then have a selection of needles. So I've got my needle felting pen with my double twisted fine needles inside. Then I've also got my second needle felting pen with 2 needles inside, which are also twisted. And then I've got a singular needle which has got a medium twisted needle inside, and that's for more of the detailed work. Then I've also got my dull needle, which is optional, which you can use to hang your bed once it's complete. So let's start with the tutorial. So I've got my needle felted ball, and the first thing I want to do is create the legs for our bed, because we want to do this before we add any wool in, because it's going to help to secure the legs into place, and it's also going to be a lot easier to insert them now whilst the polystyrene has no wool on it, as opposed to putting them in when there's loads of wool on the ball and it's just going to be almost impossible to insert them then. So I've folded my pipe cleaner in half, then I'm just going to take my wire cutters and snip it. so that it's in half. Then I'm going to take one piece of the piece I've already folded in half, and I'm going to fold it in half again, and I'm just going to cut that down the middle too, like that. Once I've done that, I'm going to insert these into my ball. Now it's important to make sure that your wire is nice and straight. If it's bent, you're going to struggle to get it inside, and it's going to be really tricky to kind of push it in and get it deep enough so it doesn't come out again. So make sure that your wire is nice and straight either end. And then I'm going to place the first one in, and I'm going to place it so that it's kind of on this side, so towards my left hand. I'm going to push it in so it's a couple of centimetres inside the ball. And then I'm going to take my second one and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to have them about an inch apart. And just again insert it so they're roughly the same length. This one's a little bit longer. Push that in a little bit more. So they should be relatively secure in there now. What I'm going to do next is take that other half of the pipe cleaner we just cut in half. I'm going to fold that in half again, and I'm going to snip it down the middle again. So I've got these two extra halves here. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to fold about an inch of this pipe cleaner upwards like this. So it looks like that, so it's like a little foot. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm going to take one of the halves of the pipe cleaner we just cut, and I'm going to fold this in half again. Just squeeze it at the top. And then I'm just going to place this over the top of my foot that we've just made, this kind of rudimentary foot. I'm going to place it over the top. I'm going to twist these two over each other like so. And there you go, 1 foot done. So it's super easy. So let's just do the same with the other one. Well, 1 foot almost done. So again, fold it in half. Place it over the top of your foot that's coming upwards. Fold the two wires across each other nice and tightly. You want to make sure it's really nice and tight so they can't unravel. And there you go. It's your second foot. So what we want to do now is we want to trim our feet to get them all looking the same length. So I'm just going to take my wire cutters and I'm just going to trim them so they're all roughly about 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm just going to fold over the ends just to get rid of any exposed wire, like so. And then the same on the other side. So they're really simple feet, and you could go for making them a lot more intricate and spending a lot more time wrapping them and making them a lot more realistic. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I just wanted to do something quick and easy that anyone can do without too much hassle. So no wrapping today, we're just using the pipe cleaners. Okay, so now we've got this kind of ball shape with a couple of feet attached, so it looks a bit strange at the moment. So what we want to do now is we want to add some bulk to it. So I'm going to take some core wool, and there's 3 areas that I want to work on our bird. So we want to create more of a larger breast area right at the front. I want to create more height here for the head, and then I also want to create more volume here as well for the bottom where we're going to have the wings coming out. So I'm going to take a strip of core wool, which is measuring about 11 inches in length and about 2.5 inches in width. And it's kind of sort of this thickness, so not overly thick. Get rid of that naughty bit of black. And I'm just going to fold it over itself into like this Swiss roll shape. And I'm just going to give it a stab down so it can't unravel. Like that. So this now measures about 3.5 inches by 2 inches. So you've got this kind of Swiss roll, which we're now going to add to the body of our bird. Now you can either go horizontally or you can go vertically. I think I'm going to go vertically on this occasion because the kind of bird I'm making, the breast area kind of goes more vertical than it sort of does in terms of its spread going outwards. So I'm going to hold it this way. You can go another way if you want to, it's not a problem, it doesn't really make any difference, you're just going to get a slightly different looking bird. So I'm going to hold it down in place and then I'm just going to felt using my twisted medium needles, this Swiss roll shape into our ball. Now if you don't like the sound of cotton wool or polystyrene being stabbed by, metal needles, look away now, because this could be quite distressing for you over this area. The good thing about doing it this way as well is you're already adding height to where we want the head too, so you're kind of saving yourself a little bit of time in the long term when it comes to adding our head shortly. I'm just going to felt this around the back, secure that down into place, stabbing down into the mat. You can be relatively brutal with this. I wouldn't go too crazy because of the wires, but I mean ultimately you're just stabbing into polystyrene, so you can't do too much damage with your needles, but always take them out in the same direction. I always say that because that's when you stab them, and because this is quite dense it would be really easy to break your needles, so just go really cautiously when you're taking your needles out. So I'm just going to stab down the side areas now just to get this integrated in with the rest of the body. And then once everything's secured in place, then you can start to stab all over, just get it secured down. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this. So you've got this piece of ball now that's attached to your polystyrene ball. The legs are still poking out, everything's looking relatively symmetrical. The next thing we want to do is add some volume for our head. So we're going to come back to that piece of wool that we just had. So I'm going to take a piece the same size roughly as the size we had earlier on, and I'm just going to fold it into this kind of rough squashed ball shape. Nothing too massive. And then I'm just going to move that out of the way, felt that down a little bit. So you've got something that looks a little bit like this, and this is measuring about just over 2 inches in diameter, and then thickness wise it's about just under 1.5 inches. So I'm going to go back to my bird. I'm going to place this where we want our bird's head to be, but I'm going to position it slightly back from where we've got this belly area here, okay? And I'm just going to stab it down into position. Don't worry if the legs are kind of splaying out, they'll be fine. I'm just going to get it all secured down, so I'm felting on the outside, felting downwards. Getting it all attached to the polystyrene ball. Okay, and once you've got it kind of secured down roughly, you can then start to felt it down a bit more, felting around the top area as well, just to get it nicely secured into place. And to start forming that shape that we're going to aim for, that bird shape. And you want to felt down the sides as well, pushing those sides sort of into each other, just to create a bit more height for your bird head. Then finally, I'm going to take that last piece of wool back. So this last piece is slightly smaller than the other pieces. This piece is measuring about 10 inches by about just under 2 inches. And again, we're going to do another Swiss roll. So probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rolls. Stab that down so it can't come undone. So there you go, and then I'm just going to attach that just to the back of our bird. Careful with your needles that you don't hit the wire where the legs are. And then I'm just going to fold this part underneath, under the belly, but you've got this kind of area here that's kind of protruding outwards. Just going to secure that down. These could make really lovely Christmas decorations, and they're so simple to make. Don't take too much effort at all. It's just lots of wrapping and rolling. And if you don't want to use the polystyrene balls, because I understand, you know, I completely get that some people want to use biodegradable products, they don't want to add more plastic and horrible stuff into the environment. You could absolutely use needle felted balls or washer dryer balls or something like that instead. You don't have to use the polystyrene balls. See, my rationalisation for it is I think, yes, they aren't great for the environment, but you're making something that someone's going to keep for a long time. And I think to myself, actually, as long as it's treasured and it's kept and it's not thrown away, we're not harming the environment. So if we're making something really well made from it, I understand where people are coming from in terms of it not being good for the environment, but I think as long as we use things and we use things sensibly and we keep things, then it's not too bad. It's like when I buy Chinese from my Chinese shop and it always comes in a plastic container. Actually, it could probably come in a metal container, but it comes in a plastic container. And I always keep them because they're quite handy for lunches and things like that, and I don't like throwing plastic away. But imagine quite a lot of people just bin them, and that's harmful for the environment because it's that kind of one-use plastic philosophy. Whereas if we're kind of always using it for as long as the item survives, I think to myself, you know, is it that bad? Am I just trying to justify it in my head for myself? Possibly. Okay, so now we've got a bit of a bird shape coming along. So what I'm going to do now is just add a bit of wool where the legs are, just to secure them in place so they can't come out easily. So I'm just going to take a pinch of white and I'm just going to felt that over the area where our leg is. Just get it secured into place. And then finally, I'm just going to add one more strip of wool just to cover this area, to build this breast area up a little bit more, and also to cover the sides where the wool's still exposed. So I'm going to go back to my core wool, and again, I'm just going to make a sausage shape, and I just want it to be long enough so it just goes round and covers both of these sides. And then I'm just going to hold that in place. I'm just going to felt that down into the areas where the wool's exposed, holding it down with my hand. And it just integrates everything nicely without adding too much bulk along those side areas. And if you wanted to with the legs as well, you could put a little bit of super glue on the end of the pipe cleaner and then insert it, and then it just keeps it nice and secure there as well. I find that the wool holds it in place relatively well, but that might be something you want to consider doing. It's entirely up to you. I'm also going to add a little bit more height to the top of our bird's head. So I'm going to take another strip of the wool. This one is measuring 8 inches by 2 inches. And again, I'm just going to fold it over into kind of like a large Swiss roll shape. So something this size, so probably about 3 inches by about 2 inches. And I'm just going to place that on top of the head and felt it down, just to give it a bit more height. Just hold it down with your hand, and then just make sure that when you're stabbing away from your fingers. And make sure you stab in this area here where you've got this additional ridge, just to get that nicely blended in with the first piece that we added. There we go, so he should look something like this. So now we can start adding colour onto him. So I'm going to take my brown Corriedale, this kind of taupe coloured Corriedale, tearing off some sections, and then I'm just going to pull it apart, so holding it far away from each other, gently pulling and then layering on top, and then just making it a little bit wider, just teasing it out, and then I'm just going to place this piece over the back of our bird, still using my medium needles, and just felt that down. You'll find this is quite soft, but don't worry too much. We don't need it to be super firm. Like I said, this is a quick make, so this is something that you could do really quickly as like a little gift for a child or a parent or something like that. If you wanted to go ahead and sell them, you might want to spend a little bit longer getting everything a little bit firmer with the felt. You obviously want it felted enough so that everything's nice and smooth, but you don't have to get it rock solid. It doesn't need to be rock solid at all. You'll also find if you felt too much, then you're going to have to add more volume to the chest and to the head as well, because it all gets kind of compressed down. And I guess this just shows you how easily things can be created by just a simple ball shape, and and some wrapping of wool, some rolling of wool into Swiss rolls, and it really does create something super effective. And you've kind of tripled the volume of your polystyrene ball by now. And I'm going to take some more of my wool, and then I'm just going to felt again. So I'm tearing it away with both hands, splaying it out, and I'm just going to place this over my head shape. And I'm placing the wool so that it's placed vertically rather than horizontally, because I just think it gives you a better finish once everything's felted down. Don't worry too much about the belly because we are going to add that pink, but if the brown overlaps, that's fine. And I'll come back to you in a second once all this is felted down into place. Right, so I've covered everything with that taupe coloured corridale. What we want to do now is start thinking about giving our bird back a bit of shape, because at the moment it's looking a bit bulky. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press in with my fingers here and just create a bit more shape with my needles between the neck and the breast area. We want to create more of a kind of a dip into the neck here, if you can see here. I can't think of the right word for it at the moment. But this area we want to go inwards, so you've got some definite divide between the chest area and the head area. So I'm just going to go in with my needles and recreate that, get that in there again. Otherwise it just all looks like one big ball of wool and you don't have that bird-like shape. So I'm still using my medium needles. This wool can take it really, it's got a nice bounce and flexibility to it, so you don't really get too much of an indentation left because the wool's got this lovely bounce to it. Right, so the brown is added. So what I want to do now is add the pink to create that pink breast area.